Netflix's Haunted, Top 10 Episodes. Netflix has its fair share of interesting horror stories. The Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor are two series that have garnered significant amounts of attention. Joining this bandwagon, Haunted happened to be another great Netflix series whose third season came out in 2021. Haunted is a bit different from the other horror series. Instead of following one particular storyline, Haunted has an episodic nature where each episode tells a new tale. This supernatural series works as a quasi-documentary. The stories are based on true events experienced by real people. It begins in a personalized, conversational form as the narrator is surrounded by their friends and family while they tell their unconventional paranormal experience. In the show, we don't see the real people who have gone through these experiences, but rather are subjected to a reenactment of those. Each story brings something new to the table. Even though the stories initially aren't that creepy, they follow a convincing plotline with a convenient pace. Unlike several shows that start off with a bang but end up aging like milk, Haunted has gotten better with each season. In fact, Season 3 changed its format a tad bit. Instead of beginning with the narrator, it begins with a backstory that we see of the paranormal forces or the antagonists. The themes of the stories are versatile, ranging from creepy stories of people who committed suicides in the house to witchcraft and torturous cults. The style is very much like a podcast and can be enjoyed even without the visuals. As the narrator talks about their experience, the others often share their opinions from time to time, making each episode a lot more personal for the audience. In this video, we will talk about 10 episodes that have some of the best stories in this series. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The Woman in White, Season 1, Episode 1. The first episode follows the story of a middle-aged guy called Jason, who recounts his experiences with his people. Growing up, Jason did not belong to the most financially fortunate families and would often move around motels for shelter. One of his earliest memories was that of a man with an axe committing murder in a restaurant. After the cops pulled over, the murderer was shot. Traumatized by this incident, Jason's mother had had enough, and the family moved to an affordable apartment in Anaheim. But their problems were far from over. In fact, for Jason, it wasn't even the beginning. Jason did not feel comfortable in the new house, especially in his room upstairs. Something was off, and boy, was he right about that one. The closet doors would open by themselves or make uncomfortable sounds, as if someone was behind it.
I would close them at night, and I'd turn around and they'd be open.
One day, Jason began to hear someone who was calling him out by his name. It began as whispers, with the closet doors creaking more often, and eventually got more overbearing. When he told his parents about it, they ignored him.
They just brushed it off. They just made me feel like...
Jason got into a habit of sleepwalking and had a vision of him covered in blood. One night, things got rough as Jason finally saw what was behind the closet, a woman in a white dress, her body tattered and bloodied, hanging by a rope. He began to see her every day, and she would often leave the closet space to close in on him. When he used the Ouija board to contact the spirit, he learned that it wanted to hurt him. Jason sought out the church and God, but it did not work. Years went by and Jason kept living with the ominous entity in his closet. Life was terrible already, but it got worse when the water in his bathwater turned blood red while he was in it. His mom cleaned the mess, and Jason realized that she was very well aware of what was going on, but she did nothing as they did not have enough money to move out. But this incident was way out of proportion, and they decided to move to Bakersfield.
My mom really pushed for us to move back to Bakersfield, where the rent's a little cheaper, a little easier to get by.
The landlord of the apartment was surprised Jason's family lasted that long, since not too long ago, the lady who lived there had killed her 2 kids in the bathtub and then hung herself in the closet. Jason realized that everybody knew about the situation and no one bothered to tell him or consider his feelings. Life got better after he moved to Bakersfield, and he would often go out with his friend on their bicycles. He thought he was finally free until he saw the woman in white again while on the streets. He was shocked and taken aback when a car closed in on him and accidentally hit him. His friend wanted to call for an ambulance, but the spirit took over his friend's mother, and using her as a medium, said that Jason was supposed to be dead.
Looking at me, but she's not seeing me, and says, "You're supposed to be dead."
The spirit had traveled with him to his new house. Jason ran away and lived from place to place, never staying more than a night at one place to outrun the woman in white. He got married and had a daughter. He thought he was safe now, but one day, as he went outside the bowling alley where he worked, he saw the woman in white calling to him. He immediately went into a state of cardiac arrest and his heartbeat flatlined. But the medics had already reached him by then, and he was brought back after he was defibrillated. He realized that he had died for a few seconds, and the woman in white began to bother him, as he had died for a moment there. But in the end, Jason confesses that she was back again, and he did not know how long he could go living like this, with a hateful entity that was out for his life.
Don't worry, Harvey. Everything's gonna be okay.
Children of the Well, Season 1, Episode 4. This episode follows the story of Harvey Althos, who was tormented in life by the spirits of 3 dead children. He had moved from South Dakota to Iowa with his family. The house they had moved into was supremely creepy from the get-go, and in the basement, there was a well. Harvey came from an overly religious and Orthodox Christian family and felt like his mother used religion as a form of psychological warfare on him. She would read excerpts from the Bible, and anytime anything referred to the paranormal, his mother would look him directly in the eye as if something was wrong with him, as if he was not normal. In his room, Harvey could feel something ominous happening around him. The door would creak as if someone was walking past him. His bed would start shaking, and he would hear voices of children calling him downstairs to the basement to play with them.
Come down to the basement.
One night, the door flung open and he saw one of the kids. Terrified, he told his parents about it, but his mom took him to the basement angrily and locked him there. In the basement, the kids would come out of the well and ask Harvey to play with them.
Come play with us.
When he was allowed back into the house, he told his mother about his experience, and she hit him with a Bible. He learned that there was a demonic possession in him, and he was hated by his mother as she could not stomach the thought of birthing a possessed child. Harvey began to feel suicidal when the kids appeared in front of him one day and told him that they would take care of his mother.
We'll take care of your mother.
2 days later, he found a dirty, burnt, and tattered doll by his doorstep and realized that he had to offer it to the kids, and so he did. Right after that, his mother, who had no physical ailments prior to this, ended up dead all of a sudden. And then he saw those kids again and realized what their words meant when they said that they would take care of her. They also left the offering with Harvey. He was very happy after the death of his mother, and one day saw her spirit, who vowed to protect him forever.
I'll be with you forever.
He felt happy, and the incidents with the children stopped. He grew up and realized that he had psychic powers, such as knowing things before it would happen. He joined the Navy so that he could help people. One day, one of the chaplains in his division called to see him and told him how being a psychic made him a person with immense potential. He also mentioned how Harvey's mother, Dolores, had asked the chaplain to call him. Harvey decided to use his powers to help others. His sister's husband had shot himself dead in the shed one summer. Harvey went to the spot with his sister and was able to contact her husband's soul. He realized that helping people this way was his life's purpose. He went back to the basement and returned the burnt doll to the well in the end. Alien Infection, Season 1, Episode 5. This episode follows the story of Lindsay, who, like the others, had moved to a new house and was greeted with something very unpleasant. But her story crosses the lines of demonic spirits and meddles around one with extraterrestrial creatures. Meanwhile, her mother suffered from cancer. One day, Lindsay noticed 3 alien-like figures in the backyard. She did not tell anyone as she thought it would be a horrible thing to bring up. when her father was struggling to make ends meet and her mother was fighting death. She had a regular routine and nothing special happened until one day. Her entire room lit up when she went to sleep. She opened her windows and noticed a UFO. However, there was a blip in her memories after this, and she found herself on her bed in the morning with no idea of what happened after that, and how she was back in the bed again. A few days later, she experienced excruciating pain around her abdominal region and had to be taken to the hospital. Several tests were conducted. When she was being given IV, she began to have terrible flashbacks of being forced to take a needle against her will. The doctors said that her physical stats were absolutely fine, so her father deduced that she had done this for attention. 2 years later, her mother died and they moved back to where they had come from. The alien incidents stopped taking place, and Lindsay felt relief as she thought it was only tied to the land.
And then we moved into town, and everything stopped.
Until she was 19, everything was all right. But one day, while studying, she saw the light again. It disintegrated her walls, and then she suddenly found herself waking up on her bed. She got up on a table and checked the dust on the ceiling fan where she could see the marks of her fingers. It looks like she held back while something dragged her. She contacted the parents of a friend who believed in these things. They told her that she wasn't crazy and that this had been happening to several people at several places. And yet, no one would remember what was going on as those entities did not want people to remember. Lindsay would often wake up with symbols on her body, which would disappear after a day. She realized that the aliens marked their targets with the help of those symbols to make their capture more convenient to carry out.
I feel like that I'm a tagged animal being used for medical purposes.
Sometime later, Lindsay met with a man whom she fell in love. They got married. Life was great until she began to have the same excruciating pain again and was rushed to the hospital. Once again, she began to have flashbacks while she was being given the IV. And this time, her visions were a lot more vivid. She would see creatures probing close to her with needles, trying to do something to her body. Lindsay got a hysterectomy done where it was revealed that she had everything: fibroids, cysts, tumors, endometriosis, everything. The surgery was done to deal with that problem, making her infertile. As the episode ends, Lindsay confesses that she is yet to know if they are done with her, and she thinks these experiences will not stop. The Mimic, Season 2, Episode 1. The story is about Rebecca's life in college, when she lived in an apartment alone with her new friends. Rebecca had postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or POTS, P-O-T-S, since a really young age. It would make her faint often, so she got a device fitted to her wrist. The monitor would beep before a fainting episode so that Rebecca could contain herself and prevent it. After graduating high school, Rebecca decided to go to community college. She ended up making friends at the bar, the same friends who were sitting with her in the room in the episode. She also had a boyfriend called Jared and felt like she was on cloud 9. She moved to a new house in Cleveland. It was a historic house from the early 1900s, and she lived there with her friend Z. While setting up and coloring her room, she saw a patchy red spot on the ceiling. As she tried to color over it, Z began to call for her. She went out of the room but couldn't find her friend. Meanwhile, the door to the basement creaked open by itself. When Z arrived, Rebecca learned that Z wasn't at home when Rebecca was called.
Were you just here a few minutes ago? And she said no, that she wasn't home.
Rebecca would often hear the voices of her friends calling to her, and the voices would come from the basement, and her heart monitor would beep every time she would get flustered. It got overbearing, and Becca realized that there was something ominous about a grate on the floor that led to the basement. Her boyfriend Jared had come over a few days later. As they were sleeping, Jared heard Z calling to him. He went out of the room but got locked in when the door got locked by itself. However, he was finally able to get back to Rebecca, and he told her everything. She felt relieved to an extent when she realized that this was actually happening and she was not going crazy. Their other friend Brandon decided to move in with Rebecca and Z. She could not tell him about the ghost in the house as she was relatively new to the circle and did not want her friends to judge her, but she told him that there were no other rooms. Brandon volunteered to go to the basement, and Rebecca did not stop him as she did not know what to say, as Brandon was in his new room. Rebecca slipped into the room, dressed skimpily. She stripped down her clothes and began to make out with Brandon after seducing him. Just then, Brandon realized something was wrong as Rebecca's body began to burn. It wasn't Rebecca at all. On finding out, she thought about how this thing could even look like them and felt violated. One day, she was looking at the patchy red area on the ceiling while lying on the bed with Jared, and they saw a face try to come out of it. They went to the attic and noticed splatters of blood all around. After getting their hands on some newspapers, Rebecca learned that a man had shot himself dead in that attic, and the red mark was his blood. On another day, Rebecca was taking a shower when a horrifying creature that looked like it was mutated appeared in front of her and began to close in on her. After that incident, Rebecca and her friends moved out of that crazy house. Cult of Torture, Season 2, Episode 3. This episode follows the story of James, who was tortured by a cult. The story here is super realistic, which makes it even more horrifying. James was born to a normal family and had a regular, happy childhood with his brother until his mother discovered Herbert W. Armstrong's broadcast. He headed the Worldwide Church of God, which he called the only true church while the world had succumbed to Satan. He said that there were demons among people and their church could handle it. Influenced, James's mother decided to adopt a very orthodox Christian lifestyle, and they moved to a new house where the kids weren't allowed any entertainment, as it was believed that opening your mind made you susceptible to being possessed. One day, James's feminine nature drew attention in the church, and he was said to have been possessed by a gay demon. But as they had stated, James only attracted the demon because he had opened his mind to being gay. As a result, he was locked in his room and went for days without water or food so that the demon's grip on his soul would loosen. He had to suffer with this till he was 15 because the demon could not be exorcised, so his mother would often touch him where she shouldn't to make him respond to a woman's touch. During his teens, the priest from his church came over and James was taken to a camp. He was blindfolded so that he could not see where he was being taken to. At the new facility, he was made to strip and bathed in cold water. It was called the New Bethany Home for Boys. They wanted to exorcise the gay demon in him, and he was being given dog food or bovine food to eat. He was also kept in a cell where he would be whipped. He was locked to a chain with gauntlets, without any clothes but his underwear, while it was cold outside. He would have to pee and pass his stool there as he stood in that condition, and his feet turned blue. The sun would rise, go down, and rise again. He was taped to a chair and electrocuted after being shown pictures of gay couples kissing, so that he would associate homosexuality with pain. He was also thrown on a table and raped by other men when he saw the silhouette of a demon in flesh.
While they were raping me, I saw this demon.
After 17 weeks of incessant torture, he went back home. However, his father did not accept him as the members of the church told his family that James did not even try to fight the demon. He left home after that and met a man with whom he shared his first kiss. He decided that he would move to New Orleans, start his life, and accept himself for who he is, and express the homosexual side of him. The LA Welfare raided the Bethany Boys' home and labeled the Worldwide Church of God as a cult. Herbert W. Armstrong was outed as a pedophile who had molested his own daughter. Spirits from Below, Season 2, Episode 4. The episode follows the story of Elle, whose family was tormented by the spirits in their house. Elle came from a Filipino family. Her dad decided to move to the United States with his family after he had taken down a large gang and become their target. In the new house, the rent was very cheap, even though the property was quite large. Elle began to notice spirits in the house, and so did her mother. But according to Filipino culture, acknowledging the existence of the ghost only fed it and made it more powerful.
Don't look at it. It won't scare you.
So the entire family conveniently ignored what they were seeing. Her other siblings would hear children laughing near her room. The laugh sounds would actually come from the dolls. One day, Elle saw the figure of an old man in her house and peed out of fear. However, her mother blamed her for everything. Every day, she would see a little girl in her room who would approach her. The kid would then act playful, and as Elle was a lonely kid, she would often play with the girl. But as they played together, the girl began to throw her things away. Later, she took her doll and lit it on fire along with her desk. That day, half of their house got burnt down. Her nephew also became victim to this girl when she ran away with his ball and then tried to drown him. Meanwhile, Rebecca grew up with this girl being a malicious presence in her life. On one night, it offered Elle a ton of sleeping pills and a blade for her to commit suicide. Elle attempted to do so and managed to survive. Things cooled down for a bit, and she met her now husband, Chris. Elle had a child and Chris moved in with her. They couldn't go somewhere else as they did not have the money to do so. The little girl began to appear again and filled Elle's mind with rage and hatred towards her husband. Her daughter would also play with the spirit of a boy who would try to make her jump off the roof. One day, Elle's mind got so twisted that she tried to kill her husband, but her husband managed to overpower her, and he also understood that this action was not her doing. Her mother contracted Alzheimer's disease and told Elle about the spirits from below being after her. However, Elle here has sold the house and believes that this has helped her close the chapter. Born Cursed, Season 2, Episode 6. This episode revolves around the story of Oscar, who was born cursed. When Oscar was born, a ritual of white magic was performed on his pregnant mother. Oscar was born with a sack around his skin. This meant that he was either very special or cursed. One day, Oscar walked around his neighborhood against his mother's orders and saw a man with a bloodied smell and a horrible smile come at him. The man was surprised to see how Oscar could see him. Just then, Oscar's mother came there and took him home, while refusing to understand his point of view. He would often see the man with his hideous smile and began to call him the Hangman. Once he went to Mexico for a vacation and thought that he could now be far from his problems. But during the annual fiesta of San Felipe, some of the clowns in the street died from a car accident. Among them was the spirit that was haunting Oscar, and it gave the same sinister smile as he does to his other victims. This time, Oscar wasn't the only one who saw it.
I saw this clown, this big smile.
The spirit had followed Oscar to Mexico and was now visible to the others as well. It went after Oscar and two of his brothers. When his grandfather closed in on the spirit, it killed the family dog by breaking its neck and ran away.
Whatever that thing was, broke the dog's neck.
He returned from Mexico and was tormented by the sight of the hangman every day. One day, it hit him, and the next, it gave the warning that it would kill his brother. Oscar overdosed on cough syrup medicine and dreamt of a slaughterhouse where the hangman would cut meat while people would scream from all over the place. When he woke up, he found out that he almost died due to the overdose. The curse stopped appearing since then, but recently, a spirit with the same smile made itself visible in front of Oscar's children. Haunted by Henry, Season 3, Episode 2. This episode follows the story of Wyatt, who was haunted by the spirit of Henry Croft. The episode begins with a scene in 1980s British Columbia, in the Crofton mine. As the miners worked, a light fell to the floor and caused an explosion, but it looked like something cut the light off strategically to cause the explosion. One of them managed to survive and asked Mr. Croft for help, but Mr. Croft dropped his cigar and walked away. Henry Croft owned the mining location and was everyone's boss. They all had to submit to him. Not listening to him made people disposable, and the horrible working policies caused a lot of deaths. Wyatt's family had moved to Henry Croft's house, which was huge but affordable. Wyatt felt something ominous in the house from the very beginning. In a room, he saw several life-sized dolls, which freaked him out. There was also a woodshed where Wyatt ventured into. He also saw splatters of blood on the wall. His sister would often hear the chair rocking and the smell of cigar smoke. She also went around the other corners of the house and saw things being preserved in formaldehyde. She would look at pictures of people in coffins, old pictures that were kept in a chest. Wyatt's toy fire truck would move by itself with its signals blaring, even though there was no battery in it. He would go down to his sister where they would see an orange cigar light get brighter, and then a flash of Henry Croft would scare them. The fire truck went off on another day again. Wyatt was walking past his staircases then. Ghost came behind him, smoking a cigar, and pushed him off the stairs. During another instance, Wyatt's fish hooks were laid on the floor and the fire truck signaled again. Wyatt stepped down from his bed and his foot got impaled by the hooks. The strange part was that Wyatt took great care of his fishing equipment and would be the last person to keep them lying around on the floor. He went back to the shed and learnt about Henry Croft and the previous owner of this house dying due to his haunting. When Jessica's, Wyatt's sister, friend Diane came over, things began to get ruined in their room. They were flung and destroyed. The kids ran away and their mother was shocked when she found out. That day, Diane died from a car accident as well. Wyatt realized that Henry Croft got something out of the fear of his victims, which is why he pushed them harder. In the end, the family left the house for their own good. Gift of Evil, Season 3, Episode 3. This episode is about Emily, a girl who was adopted by her family, and her life was ruined by a gift given to her out of love. A little girl walked through the woods with a music box. The box had a dancing girl who danced to the Swan Lake theme. She was chased by men and killed by being thrown into a lake. Her music box crashed on the ground and lay there. On Emily's birthday, her godmother, who loved her a lot, gifted her that music box with her name engraved into it. It also came with a very pretty pendant. As Emily was in her room, trying to wear that pendant, she felt like something touched her from behind. One day, as Emily worked on her school stuff, the music box began to play the theme again, even though it was closed. The sound was detuned and distorted, but it was still there. Emily reopened and closed the box to get rid of the sound when she began to hear a girl humming it. And then the girl who was killed in the very first scene appeared in front of her, causing Emily to freeze in her tracks out of fear. Another day, as Emily lay in her bathtub, the girl reappeared and tried to drown her. When she told her mother about it, her mother called her crazy. She saw the girl while playing chess with her father, but he could not see her and thought that Emily was weird.
What did your dad say?
My dad just looked at me weird.
One night, the sound becomes audible as Emily sleeps. The girl comes to her and bites her neck. Emily finds out about this after she wakes up from the pain of the bite. Time went by, and Emily now met this new guy. They had fallen in love and she moved in to live with him and his daughter. The little girl's spirit stopped appearing and everything was fine until the box began to play the music again. Her husband took the box out and looked at it. He immediately began to retch and throw up. An almost similar thing happened with his daughter when she realized that the box was cursed. A few days later, the guy's daughter was attacked by the girl, and Emily's boyfriend blamed her for everything.
This is all your fault.
He asked her to leave the house immediately and leave them alone. Heartbroken, she took the music box to a medium who told Emily the story about the girl whose name was originally Emily as well. And the carving of the name in the box was done for that girl and not for the Emily who was being tormented. In the end, Emily went back to the lake where the girl was killed and drowned the music box.
Get out of my house!
The Witch Behind the Wall, Season 3, Episode 4. In this episode, Brandy tells the story of being tormented by a witch who lived behind the wall in her house. The episode begins with a hag-like woman preparing her things for what could be voodoo and black magic. There is a miniature model of a house where she performs her voodoo and laughs in a sinister way. Brandy had moved into a new house with her single mother and brother. While entering the gates, she saw a scary-looking woman and ran away out of fear. But then she is told that she is just a crazy old lady and she has nothing to worry about. Brandy moves into the house and goes to her room. She finds a wall that intrigues her and gets close to it. Behind that wall was the woman with her voodoo house and things. Suddenly, Brandy is lifted up from the ground as if she was being strangled by someone. She was, but this was all happening as the woman practiced her witchcraft. She told her mother about it, but nothing could be done. Brandy stopped sleeping there while her mother used salt to cleanse that house. Things were fine for a few days. One day, as Brandy was watering the plants, the witch woman appeared and asked her to get out of her house.
Get out of my house.
Meanwhile, her brother did not think something paranormal was happening. As he slept in that room with the wall, the woman used a rope on something while toying with her miniature house voodoo model. Her brother immediately felt like he was being strangled. His mother arrived and noticed that he had gashes on his neck, gashes that appears after being strangled by a rope. By this time, everyone was sleeping downstairs, so the other sister, Rachel, who thought that none of this was real, took the bed upstairs. As she slept, the woman performed black magic. The small table fan on the desk suddenly began to work, and Rachel slept with her hand stretched near the fan. The fan turned and it cut her fingers. Now Rachel had also become a victim of the situation and began sleeping downstairs. One day, Brandy and her brother found the room of the woman and saw figures with their pictures on them. They saw the model of the house, the ropes, the blades of the fan used to do the voodoo on them. The witch appeared and they hid under the table for a while. Once they ran away, the witch noticed it and locked the doors to separate the two of them. She then let in a whirlwind of smoke towards Brandy and screamed out, "Get out of my house!" Their mother called a priest who mentioned how the negative energy was too heavy for cleansing, and they decided to leave the place. Ultimately, the witch got what she wanted. What did you think about these stories? Did you enjoy the video? If yes, then don't forget to like and comment on the video. Till next time, goodbye and have a nice one.